Hello and welcome to the Slumberingslothbooknook, a podcast about all things books, publishing and more. My name is Emma and today my guest is Pernille Hughes. Pernille is a published author within the RomCom genre. Now on with the show. Hello, Pernille. Hello.
Hello. Hello. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for coming on today.
Pleasure.
Awesome. Okay, so how did you first decide to become a writer?
So I've always made up stories talking them through to myself since I was little. I'd spend summer holidays just walking around chatting to myself, which is obviously completely normal. Just little bits of dialogue, little stories, and then I'd write little stories. So I've always enjoyed stories and writing them, and that would be my favourite thing at school. And I always thought I'd be a writer, and then an English teacher, who was also my careers teacher, put me off and said that my English wasn't good enough or wouldn't be. And my dream of being probably a journalist at that point kind of went up the swanny. I really didn't know what to do because it had been the only thing I'd wanted to do. And I didn't write again for about 10 years. And then in the meantime, I went to advertising and marketing, and then I worked for the company that made Teletubbies, which was a brilliant time. And then I had 4 babies in the space of 5 years.
Wow.
So actually, I couldn't afford to work there anymore because I had twins at the end. And there was just me and, one had gone to school by that point, but the 3 little there with me. And I could feel my brain kind of shrinking. And so I thought, right, I've always wanted to write a children's book. And so I thought, especially coming from a children's TV producer, it was kind of something, the world I was in. So I thought, right, I'll use the time and do a course. So I did a correspondence course, writing for children, and it was mainly just to keep myself going, and I really enjoyed that. And from that I had two novelty books optioned, but then during that option time the company changed direction, so they dropped their novelty books. So I started writing picture books and started sending those out and got some lovely rejections. And then I wrote a teen book, again sent out, got lovely rejections. And then I wrote I thought the next step up would be a longer book, so a YA book, and again, lovely rejection. So all the time I was kind of writing bigger and probably kind of aging up each time, and just really growing a thicker skin, probably, just with all the rejections, but at the same time getting useful comments that meant I kept going, really. And then in the meantime, I'd been reading, I think my parents had the Sunday Times, and they had this little section in the travel section, column in the travel section called Confessions of a Tourist, which were kind of slightly racy holiday stories, 650 words. I thought, I can write one of those. So I had a go, and I sent it in, and they bought it. And then I wrote about 36 of those, just ideas that came, and it was nice to get money for what I was writing. And then a friend sent me a link to an anthology of chick-lit stories, short stories, and they were putting the anthology together. It was Belinda Jones doing it, and they had 3 spaces open to non-published writers, and it was a competition. So I entered that, and I came runner-up. And at that point was when I realised that my voice was right for chick-lit. Because I'm really slow. And so that was then what I did. And I thought, I need to now write the full-length novel. And that's kind of my story to becoming a writer or an author.
That's great, because as you said, it's just a lot of progression and learning sort of over the time with your writing.
So much. So it was for me. I don't know whether other people can just sit down and just, cough out a ready-to-go book. But I kind of thought I had wanted to write in one area, but actually my voice lends itself to another area, and I just had to have a really long-winded way of getting there.
Yeah, exactly. And also it's just finding your niche throughout the time of what kind of novel that you want to write. I guess it's a variety of different things.
Yeah, and I think everyone, when they find their voice, it may be very particular to a certain area, and it's if you're going to write, for me, 90,000 words, that's a long time. So putting on a voice that's not yours, it must be exhausting, really, and also difficult to pull off. Because if an agent and then subsequently a publisher would be reading it, they see so much. They must be able to see through when people are faking it, I guess, for any better way of describing it.
Yeah, of course. Because obviously on this end, I've spoken to a lot of people that obviously deal with the submission side of it, and it's different when you sort of talk to the author how their side of it, how it progresses. So getting submitted, getting published, and seeing both sides is quite interesting. So what was it like when you first got published? When you first got something published, or your novel, or whatever experience?
So when Harper had taken the book, that was kind of there was such a long run up to it. I mean, my first jobs was in advertising, and that's a really fast paced industry. And so coming to publishing, it's slightly odd because you don't see any of it really, or you see very little of it. For me, it felt like starting a new job and having that what I call the moron phase, where it's okay, you're learning, you're not supposed to know anything, but it was like having a blindfold on because it all happens in London. I get sent things and I respond to those, and it goes back again, and then I don't see what's happening. So that was kind of interesting and odd to me in another way, because you just, it's a very responsive way as opposed to being hands-on in it. And then also because it wasn't announced for quite a while. So I was kind of sitting on this information that really you want to shout to the rooftops because, finally you've got a publishing deal. And then it gets announced, and that was then great. But, you kind of got over it by that point because I'd known for a while. And but then, you go through all your proofs, and that's exciting. And suddenly having to read your, but then, you read your book for now so many times, you can barely see the wood for the trees, and you're ready not to read it anymore. And then it comes out, and that's kind of, it's a bit surreal in a way, because ours are ebook first with Harper Impulse. So, there's some people who go, oh no, when's the real one coming out? I go, well, it is real because it's an ebook. You can get it now.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's out there. But then they'll go, oh no, I'll wait till the real one comes out. And so they've got another 3 months to wait. But then, your books come through, and you get to sniff your book, and that's one of the best things ever.
The new book smell is lush, isn't it?
It's so good. It's so good. And you sit there with your head in the box just sniffing your books.
That image.
Also, totally normal behaviour. So no, that's a really pleasing moment.
Yeah, I've seen so many of those videos when authors open up those boxes on Twitter, and they see their book and they're just like, oh, the smell in the book.
I've done one of those.
Yeah,
I did one of those. It was an utter pleasure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just waiting for my box to arrive in the next week or so for the next one.
Do we do the same again then?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, to be honest, that's the whole thing of social media as well. You've got to, I've been on Twitter since 2012, but it was really just networking and not really doing anything. And suddenly you've got to do some publicity, and that's not really something that I've been kind of trained to do, or that whole blowing your own trumpet thing. I find that really quite difficult. And so suddenly you have to find every moment you can to I should take a picture of that. And I'm so old, I'm not part of that whole age group where you instantly and instinctively know, let's take a picture of it because this is a social media opportunity. And I come away from things and think, oh no, I forgot to take the picture for Instagram, and I just get so miffed at myself because I just forget. I just get on with doing the thing. And so here it's okay, the box is arriving soon. Make sure you get a little film so you can put it up, and that's just a new way of thinking for me as well, and really making the most of the moments as they happen.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you see so many sort of the images of authors going to the production warehouse where they see their book being printed, and then they've signed them, and there's just so many different opportunities, especially when you see authors. I mean, I've definitely noticed with sort of digital first prints that a lot of them encourage their authors to use social media now more than they used to. Then the companies they kind of work side by side. So the author is their own, I guess, brand in that way.
Yeah, and I think you really have to, from an author's point of view, you do need to take that into account because whereas I am currently signed with Harper Impulse, and I have they will post things on their Twitter page, for example, but that's their list. They own that list. And if at some point we part ways, I don't have access to that list anymore. So I do need to think of myself as my own brand as well, so that I need to build my own list somewhere, which meant I've set up my own website, which I I am literally a tech lemming. I have very little. I was the last year at school that didn't have computer studies, and so I'm scared of technology. So building my own website was just, God, it was so painful. But I managed it. And so now I can build my own list. And so that belongs to me. And then equally, my Facebook page sort of belongs to me, other than to Facebook. So I'd never Facebooked before. And that was part of the deal of coming on board, that I need to have a Facebook page. But other than that, I can choose whether I want to go on Twitter or whether I go on Instagram. So I've done those, but that's really as much as I'm capable of, really.
Yeah, exactly. As I said, it's the learning process as well.
Very much so.
Yeah. So, going back to your writing, what is your basic writing process, or your writing process throughout the stage? And I know that we said about this before. It's going to be quite sort of different for each person, because some people can just get it out on paper. Some people can just, I don't know how people can just write so many words in a day. I don't know how they do it, but some people just can.
Some can, and I've been on a few retreats, and there's people there. They're just coughing out words like 6,000 words in a day. Cressida McLaughlin, my God, she was next door to me, and she was just hurling out the words. And I think for me, I would love to be a true planner. I think if I knew my plan, I would just know where I was going and then sit down and do it. And I know that if I'm really gunning for it, I can be bringing out 2,000 words a day, 5 days a week. So that's 10,000 words. And then I'll have a book within 9 to 10 weeks. But then I need to know what I'm doing. And I think I'm about to begin in book 3.
Yeah.
I did have an earlier book 3, which I got a lot of words into and just couldn't get it worked. So I shelved it, which has put me back a bit, but it was just not ready. It wasn't time for that book. No. So I've, in the meantime, forgotten how I wrote the first 2, which is so annoying. But and I wish I'd written a diary, actually. I think if I was doing it now, if I'd say to anyone now, write a diary how you did it, because when it comes to the later books, you'll want to remember, and so much else will have happened in between. I used to write, I'd have an idea, I would then just kind of do what I call a vomit draft, which is just hurling out lots and lots of dialogue and scenes and string them together, and a big old mess. But then I'd have lots of work, and I kind of see that like in terms of sculpture, just picking your clay. And then this first draft then would be kind of putting it into a rough shape. And then the next draft, then I get a beta reader to read it, usually my critique partner who lives in the States. She will then look at it in its ugliest form and go, yeah, maybe this bit of the story and that bit don't work for me. And then I'll go and redraft again. And then you can start seeing like more finer details of this sculpture. And then it would go to the agent, and then my agent, Federica, who you've had on before, she will then say, right, we've got a story here. These elements need bringing up forward. That bit that can go. Kill off this woman here, and she can stab in my heart as she kills people off. But she's brilliant, and she's for me brilliant to have, because you're so immersed in it by that point that you can't see. You love everybody. You don't really want to kill anyone, exactly. But sometimes someone has to go. And so to have somebody who knows her stuff backwards about chick flick and rom-coms, but also can take an objective point of view. So that's brilliant. And then we redraft again, and then it goes to to Charlotte at Harper Impulse with what we then called the first draft. And then she'll also have her input, and then we do a structural edit, which I hate. Structural edit. I hate it. It's like taking a chunk out of a jigsaw and walk around in a big sulk going, it'll never fit again, it will never fit. And I'm just like I've got to sound like a teenager. And then I'll think about it for a few days and I'll go, okay, I'll try it like that. And then I never think of the first draft again.
Leave it.
I'm so fickle, because then it does work better, and then it happens, and then you go from there. So, but this time round, I'm just I want to see if I can skip one of the vomit draft and have a plan instead of a vomit draft, and then go from there. That's kind of what I'd like to do. but I don't know how that's going to work.
Just see what trial and error, I think. Just see how it works out. And it's good to try something new sometimes, because it might just open up a new creative idea stream that you've never
Absolutely.
had before. So
Yes, but I should still write that diary,
you
so I know
should.
to look for.
Yeah, you definitely should. I mean, I definitely hated when I did this module earlier this year when I did my first creative writing module, and like I had to write this screenplay, and I really loved this character, and I just didn't want to like do anything bad. So I'm like, my lecturer was like, you need to do something, like you need to make them go away. And I was like, no, I like them too much.
What, cut them completely?
Not cut them completely, but just like cut them back slightly and completely change them. I was like, no, don't want to.
Yeah,
But
no, I get
yeah,
that.
it's good
But
to have.
maybe they need to star in a different thing.
Maybe they do, and I think that it's a bigger story that can be told maybe in a bigger sort of surrounding. But as I said, the writing process is just different for each person. So
Yeah.
I think definitely the vomit draft, I should maybe try doing a vomit draft for my dissertation. That probably might help after doing some research.
Just a stream of consciousness that you just write, you don't go back, you don't save edit, and even as you're going, you think, right, that has to be changed at the beginning now. You keep writing, you keep going forward, you don't go back and change. You make a little note, or, if you get stuck on words, you just put X's in instead, or something, and then with thesaurus, afterwards, and just keep going. You just have to have something. You're just making the clay. That's all you're making, and you will shape it later.
Exactly. I think because it's adaptations, you have to sort of stick to the source material, but you've also got so many routes and avenues that you can change. I mean, we see that all the time, especially with some books. I've seen a couple of series of people have taken Shakespeare plays and then made them into novels with the themes of the idea, but it's adapting the key themes and stuff. So I think there's definitely ways to learn to deal with that.
Yeah, and also sometimes you need to have almost told yourself the story the first time round to actually work out what your themes are, or realise you get to the end and think, no, that's not what this character's about at all.
No.
And then you go back and you start again, and then you write knowing that person and the decisions they'll make right the way through this time round. And sometimes you just have to have gone through the pain of that first draft to know. Really, it's the telling yourself the story first.
Exactly. So, sort of changing route a bit. What would your advice be for first-time writers, like people that maybe want to just start getting into writing?
So, first-time writers or first-time authors?
Either, both. I know there's probably different advice.
So, first-time writers, I would say if you can, well, firstly, just write anything you want, and just write and always have a notebook with you and just write little snippets, little bits of dialogue. If you see something that makes you laugh, write it down. Anything you observe, always just, and definitely have a notebook by your bed with a ready popped pen, so that when you dream, just as you're falling asleep, you'll have the most brilliant idea, and you'll write it down. You'll go, no, I'll definitely remember this in the morning. You will always forget. That's happened so many times to me. Or then I'll write down something which is totally undecipherable in the morning, but have the notepad. You might just write down a gem. But otherwise, I'd say write little things. And then when you start actually writing short stories, or something longer, start small. I'd say a short story, they're not easy to write, but actually they give you a really good sense of structure. And then I'd say definitely find a critique partner, someone who is another writer. They don't have to live near you. You don't have to meet up with them. My critique partner, I've never met her. She's in the States. We've been swapping writing for since 2012, I think. And but she is my first port of call, and we critique each other's work, and we are she sees my stuff when it's awful, my God, yeah, and you can, but because we trust each other now on it, then it's no one else has seen it. So that's been so useful. I would say build your community. Definitely find a community, whether you like to have like a writers group that you meet up with locally, or whether you are happy just to swap things on the internet. There are so many groups out there to be had, and then also start conversing with the writing community on Twitter is a great way to kind of get to know people, so that one day when you do get your publishing deal, you hit the ground running, already having a community that will support you. And the writing community is generally brilliant. I know there's horror stories of writers not liking each other because you want your reader to buy your book, but I can't physically produce enough books to have all the reader attention. So actually writers are your friends, and from my experience, so supportive. So really start reaching out as soon as you can, and then getting your writing mates. That would be my advice to new writers. Also, own your writing. I went for ages going, it's just a hobby, it's just something I do for fun, when actually no, I was really trying to make a go of it, but I kept it so secret, and really there was no need, and people are interested, and so no, I'd say own it. Be proud of it. If you're writing, if you're writing, then you're a writer. You should own that. For a new author, I would say, again, build your community. Definitely build your community. There are Facebook, and I would say podcast. I love podcasts, and I know you're building yours, which is great. Other podcasts out there, whether you're an indie or a traditional publishing, then really there is such a wealth of information for you to have. I religiously listen to the Bestseller Experiment. That would be, and again, generous people. Also on the Facebook groups, they're attached to the podcasts. It's all there to be had. Joanna Penn, she's another one. Mark Watson, I think. But yeah, podcasts are great, and so that's what I'd say for new authors.
Yeah, because we had Mark on a couple of weeks ago, so that was great to hear sort of his take on how writing was, sort of how he dealt with the writing side, and how that was really good to
and
talk
he's
to
God.
him.
He's just absolutely. What he doesn't know isn't worth knowing. And his information is out there. It's so generous with it as well. It's not competition. It's sharing, and that's what I really love about this, is that you only need to ask, and there will be somebody to help you or give you advice. And that's I'm really into kindness, and like kindness at the moment, there's such a lack of it going around, and to actually know it's out there, you've just got to ask, and writers are a great community.
Exactly. Okay, so coming to the end of the podcast, as I said, this question normally stumbles up people every week, but I thought I would ask, as I do every week, which book have you read recently, or book that you've read quite sort of in the past couple of months, would you like to recommend?
I'm going to go with a non-fiction book, actually, because I've just had it in my planning stages. I have a couple of books which I would always recommend if you're planning. John Yorke's Into the Woods is always a great one for structure, but I particularly like Alexandra Sokolov's book called Stealing Hollywood, the screenwriting tricks for authors, which is great, and she does a specific one called Writing Love for romance writers. If that's someone's bag, then I would always say have a look at that. That's on the Kindle, the Writing Love version. But I've just found Kate Walker's 12-Point Guide to Writing Romance, and that was a bit of a revelation, actually. I'd never heard of it before. I just found it because someone else recommended it, and it was really good. So that's Kate Walker's 12-Point Guide to Writing Romance, and it's really like picking into the depths of character and conflict. And I'm a conflict-shy person, so when it actually comes to writing conflict, I kind of run away from it, which is pointless because that's what books are about, really. So even you learn all the time. There's so many things that you can still delve into with the craft, and you just got to keep going. So that would be my recommendation.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate you coming on to discuss your obviously writing process and everything like that. And it was obviously been nice to speak to Federica and other people as well that you've obviously come into contact with. So it was good to know.
Yeah, she was. So I listened to it and it was great, and she's brilliant. She's brilliant.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
That's it for this week's episode. Thanks for listening. You can follow Pernille on Twitter at Pernille Hughes. If you'd like to be involved with the podcast, you can get in touch through Twitter at NovelM16 and use the hashtag Slothcast, or you can send me an email at slumberingslothbooknook@gmail.com. You can always find our podcast on our YouTube channel, slumberingslothbooknook, or you can download it from Podbean and Apple Podcasts for an on-the-go experience. See you next week. Bye!